If you've got a great idea, do you hold it in or do you share it? In the risk that someone would run away with that idea. Hi, I'm Dave Lewis. I'm the founder of MentorList.
He is the co-founder and managing director of MentorList Group, committed to connecting individuals with the insights of those who've successfully walked the path before.
Ask the customer what they want and give it to them. And that's the secret sauce, really. I think there's always a risk that you're going to fall in love with your product or your idea. And if you think about your success, if you think about this on any metric, you could do this exercise. Think about what is my net wealth and think about the 5 people that you hang around with the most.
He believes success is best achieved by learning from those who've already mastered it.
It's hard. Being a founder and then having a small business is difficult because you're a small business. If you're not passionate about it, you're not going to put in the discretionary effort. Not being afraid to fail, I think, is something that we'll continue to do. If you really want to go big, then you got to start a business. You got to get out of. You can't work 9 to 5 in a job.
Where big dreams meet bold action. Where we share real stories, actionable insights, and the inspiration needed to transform your ideas into businesses. Are you ready to turn your ideas into success and be an inspiration to others? Join Inspirepreneur.
Hi, I'm Dave Lewis. I'm the founder of MentorList and I'd like to chat to you today about some of the experiences and learnings that I'd like to share with you that I've picked up along the way. So I started my career, I was heading down the CFO path. I was working in one of the big telcos here in Melbourne, and I started getting some career advice. I was doing an MBA at the time, and I was kind of looking at, what's the next thing. Always had this feeling that there was something to do. I guess, I never really sort of sit still. Maybe I still have that feeling. There's always something to do. But I was getting career advice from CFOs of universities, telcos, and I was very surprised that you could just email individuals and say, hey, this is what I'm doing in my career. I see what you're doing and I'd really like to get some help or some advice around what I could potentially do. And maybe given what you've done, you'd have some good advice to share with me. So that's kind of where the MentorList concept or idea of getting that and sharing that lived experience came from. So I went about having these interviews with individuals. It was pretty casual. It was coffee, and I sort of started feeling a bit guilty. Well, I'd go, I'd get advice, I'd take it, I'd use it, I'd advance my career, and there was something sort of underneath that. And if you have like a good day, something good happens in the day, the first thing you want to do is you want to kind of share that, because by sharing it makes it bigger and better. So you'll go home and you'll tell whoever's at home, maybe it's your partner, hey, this happened. And they'll be like, oh, that's great. Well done. That's so good to hear. But just by sharing it makes it bigger. So with that sort of in mind, MentorList started by wanting to take what was a pretty personalized career conversation and turn that into what it was then, the channel was a podcast. That's where it came from. If you've got a great idea, do you hold it in or do you share it in the risk that someone would run away with that idea? And I think my thinking and experience around that is there's plenty of great ideas out there, but the challenge is actually in executing that. And things like ChatGPT these days, you can just go and type in what are 10 great ideas and you'll get 10 great ideas. But really, if you look at people that do have significant impact, it's always their ability to execute which makes them stand out. So I think you should share all ideas. And funnily enough, we had one of the pharmaceutical brands speaking with one of our CEO groups recently. And I thought it was all going to be about the product and how superior the product is, but it was actually really more about how good they could execute sales and marketing to grow their business. And certainly in that pharmaceutical space, all you have to do is buy something. You can look on the back, you can see exactly what's in it, and you can go and get that procured out of China or a low-cost economy. And then it's a sales and marketing game. So a bit of a tangent there. So just backtracking back to getting these career conversations, then the idea of podcasting came around. And so this was in 2016. So not every man and his dog had a podcast at that stage. These days it's very different because the value and the benefits being seen. So we launched a podcast. It was called MentorList. In order to do that, what I did was a whole ton of market research. So at the time it was a simple SurveyMonkey survey, and sent that out to anybody I knew that was sort of semi-professional to get their view on what should we call it, how long should it be, what questions should I ask, who should I have, will you listen to it? And if you reverse that, I had a name for the podcast, I knew how long it should be, I knew who I should have on it, I knew what questions to ask, and I knew I had a committed listenership before it started. And then I came across an interesting stat, which was that don't quote me, but it was something like 90% of podcasts never make the 7th episode. So in learning that, I launched with 7 episodes just to make sure I was in that top 10 percentile. And yeah, that was a big growth learning experience. My first podcast was actually recorded in Bali, which acoustically is the worst thing you can do. There's geckos, there's people making granitas, there's this humming power line. Everything from an audio clarity perspective didn't work. The actual conversation was fantastic, and I learned a lot in that process. I was with a gentleman named Tom Mullally, who calls himself the Freedompreneur. So shout out to Tom. I think he's still hustling in Bali, so good on you. But that was really just by executing, by learning. That's kind of how those first few episodes got made and got released. So fast forward sort of, a little bit down the line, we've got this podcast, which is getting lots of attention. It's getting lots of interest. It's purely passion. So it's time, money that I'm putting into this idea and knowing that it's going to lead to something. And so the great thing about podcasting is you get to have an intimate experience with someone, an intimate conversation. It's prepared, slightly more intimate than catching up with coffee for someone, because it's recorded, there's an experience, and it's sort of something that gels you in a way. And for those that have been interviewed or have interviewed in a podcast, you'll probably know what I'm talking about. It's maybe similar parody with maybe a really big job interview where you really want the job, you'll have this connection. So anyway, the reason I mention that is because through podcasting, you end up with these close relationships with people. And typically you'll look to do podcasts with people that are exceptional. So by default, you end up with an exceptional network of individuals, which no doubt could be learning as you go and, get exceptional individuals onto the show. Yeah, so I guess, MentorList has evolved over the years. When we first launched the podcast, we wrapped an advisory board around the business, which was then in its early stages, but we'll call it a business now. And the idea was there's something here of value. Let's work out what that is and make this a sustainable commercial business. And so that was the intent. Got some exceptional people around it. And we went about discovering through osmosis that, if we have such a hit podcast, then we must be experts in podcasting. And so then we wrapped some services around podcasting as a service, and this was back in 2016. So moving, for example, an ANZ bank from 1, explaining what a podcast is, to 2, explaining why they need a podcast, to 3, why they should get us to help them with their strategy, and then the ongoing maintenance it's a tough sell when you have to explain and then sell in the same sort of interaction. So sometimes being first is not an advantage. And I know that model works now for other businesses, and I think that's a timing thing too. So sort of coming back to, what problem are we trying to solve? We thought we had some expertise which we could share in that situation. Then we came back to our core. We had an advisory board meeting where it's like, no, it's not working, so let's scrap it and try something else. And so the consensus was that, okay, well, if we're not the experts in podcasting with the MentorList podcast, we must be the experts in mentoring. That's us. That's why people come to us. And that's where our success has come from. So then we went about launching a mentor marketplace. So you could basically hop onto the MentorList website. You could see your dream mentor as a mentee, and you could click, transact, and have an interaction with that mentor. So it was effectively a mentor marketplace. And that was a great epic fail. So we went about building something and then testing it. One of the learnings there was maybe around iterative testing along the way and testing out the concept before we got too far down the road. But the reality was, if you think about mentoring yourself, typically you'll think about your family and your extended network, and then you'll think of the most successful individual by whatever rating you're trying to classify that, and then you'll go and reach out to that person and you'll have a mutually beneficial relationship. So the mentor gets the benefit of being recognised, having the intrinsic value of then sharing their experience and watching someone who's typically fairly close from a family or network perspective grow and learn and have benefit in their lived experience. And this is typically a free arrangement. Maybe you'll pick up the tab on the coffees, but that was our nearest competitor. So our competitor was free, it was high impact, it was very trusted, versus a marketplace which is cold in the way it was sort of, where you're looking to interact, and then so people want to have a trusted way in to then get advice, and so that's what the marketplace failed to deliver. So back to sort of, eventually we'll get to sort of success once we go through all these different failures. But it really was a process of executing on something. If it doesn't work, okay, great, switch, pivot to the next sort of test. But I guess if I'm looking back, the thing that was always working was around sharing lived experience. We were first using a channel in a podcast, and that was what was resonating. Then we're looking at doing mentoring arrangements. We tried the marketplace, but it was really around getting that access to that lived experience. And that's what really, we came to the realization, and then that's what really helped us to craft and create what was Mastermind in 2019. In 2019, after the mentor marketplace, we caught up with Mike Smith. Mike was one of our original podcast guests. He was also one of our mentors that was on the mentor marketplace. And we caught up with Mike, and we're sort of talking about, why the marketplace didn't work and the sort of the value exchange that sort of sits around that. We started talking about what he wished existed when he was CEO. And like from a banking finance perspective, which was his industry, he traveled the globe running some of the biggest banks in the world. He was pretty well networked within that. Outside of that is where he started talking about being, slightly under-indexed. And one of the beliefs that he had, which we've proven many times over, was that if I'm an executive in banking, finance, retail, education, whatever the industry is, you can be sure that there's a lonely exec sitting over here that either has the same problem or has had that same problem, or maybe they've solved it, maybe they've tried something that hasn't worked. But there are two individuals operating at this level, and the potential to share in a trusted, safe environment, the value in that, in whether it's just bringing comfort or actually sharing ideas, that's where we sort of saw real value. And whilst Mike said he was sort of under-indexed, everything's relative. I thought he was extremely well networked. He was able to pull together a list of these fantastic mentors. So if you're a CEO of a big company here in Australia, having someone that's been there, done that maybe once or multiple times and had been really successful in that, that's who you want to learn from. And yeah, those individuals, whether it was a David Thodey, Gail Kelly, Richard Goyder at the time, Malcolm Jackman, these types of individuals who we brought into the program then attracted these fantastic CEOs. We had 16 CEOs in that first year, and we really brought them together in the idea of proving out whether this was going to work. And everything was transparent, and sort of traded off the reputation of Mike and the individuals that we'd brought into the program, and sort of went about, okay, well, let's do this for a year. And the great thing about CEOs or executives or founders is, these guys and girls are extremely direct. Into that first year, we basically got told, this is good, this is not good. Get this member in, get this guest mentor in, increase this duration, more events, more of this. And we're like, great, okay, you're going to tell us what you want? We'll give you that. And they said, yeah, and then we want an annual membership. So we're going to go into the second year, so let's go. So we kind of got feedback similar to, the feedback around, or the survey we did around what should the podcast be, what should it be called, all these things. Getting the voice of the customer into how you're driving the business forward. It almost seems like cheating, but it's that simple, really. Ask a customer what they want and give it to them. And that's the secret sauce, really. The privilege and burden of leadership can be quite isolating. If you're in an established business, you've potentially got a board, and so you've got a chair. The chair and CEO relationship is probably the most important relationship in any business. And you've got a bunch of, I'm talking about a typical listed board, a bunch of non-exec directors, and then you've got a leadership team. So maybe think of 8 individuals, and all these different individuals have different interests, and are so important in different ways. But so if you're in the middle there, yes, you have a relationship with whether it's your board, or whether you're in the C-suite, whether it's your CEO, or whether you're in senior management, it's whoever's above you. So there is a professional relationship there, but there's also posturing and things that go on where you can't have a truly trusted environment potentially. And the same goes with individuals who are reporting into you. You're managing them, you're leading them, but it's not really an environment where you can have certain types of conversations, because at the end of the day, you're running a business, you're driving for performance. And so there's posturing and things that go around there. So taking you out of that environment and bringing in another individual that's got similar challenges, issues, that isolation. It's this concept of being isolated but surrounded at the same time. I think that's probably a good summary of how I like to talk about leadership. So my approach to competition is actually really to focus not on the competition, what they're doing, because I think that's a reactive strategy, but look at what the customer wants and how you can look at over-delivering with the customer. Because when no businesses ever went broke, making too much money is sort of something that I picked up along the way. So yes, it's good to be aware of who your competitors are, what their products are, from a lens of our customers. We never bad talk any of our competitors because we like the fact that there's people in our industry, because it also, I guess, ticks off that, okay, there is a market here, there is a need. We're not the only lone rangers going at it. So it's great to have some competition. I think scenarios like Coke and Pepsi can really drive performance, but in our industry, I think it's fantastic. There's a few new players, there's a few older players, but really what we're focusing on is who is our customer and how do we serve them? And if we're doing that in a way that is meeting their needs, then I don't think we have an issue from a competition perspective. Yeah, I think there's always a risk that you're going to fall in love with your product or your idea. And I think that can be quite distracting, especially for founders and knowing sort of the audience here. It's often quite romantic to move from however you see yourself to then being the founder of something. I think the reality is founders, there's probably a bit of romance around that idea, but really you're in a small business. Small business is really difficult. cash flow. If you can make it through the first few years and cash flow is kind of okay to keep you going, then you get to the next stage, which is still about cash flow. And then maybe there's some people dynamic challenges there. But I mean, as a founder, you do everything and you always do everything. Even now when we see founders come and speak with our executive groups, they might be running multi-billion-dollar businesses, but you can be sure they're the first one there, the last one to leave. And they're the ones that pack up the tent cards on the table because they have this, there is no segregation of, oh no, I'm too superior to do whatever the task is. I guess, yeah, at all levels of business, it really comes back to the customer and the changing needs of that customer and being able to predict and surprise and delight that customer. Because having the best product isn't necessarily what the customer is wanting or needing. I think there's some great examples of, if you think about Blockbuster Video and Netflix, what's happened there. Think about Nokia. They were the first one with a smartphone, but they didn't think that their customers wanted a smartphone. And you've had companies that have had extraordinary rises because they've been able to really tap into that customer in the early stage of their business life cycle. Where it gets challenging is where they've had success knowing their customer and then they start going through that life cycle and they really need to start marketing, innovating to sort of start getting back to, okay, well, the customer wanted this then, but now that's changed. And how do you reinvent or disrupt or transform your own business to stay relevant with that customer? Whether it's service business, whether it's product business, doesn't really matter. It's really what does that customer want? So it's falling in love with that, which is that what we did? We kind of did a little bit of both, but whenever we fell in love with the product, it's like, yeah, great, this is a fantastic mentor marketplace. Have you seen this thing? It's great. Customer didn't want it, so it didn't work. But we kept trying to work out what the customer wants. Sometimes they tell you, sometimes you try something new and they may not know they want it. So you got to test it out. And that's where Mastermind came from. So I think, pre-pandemic, the concept of loneliness and isolation was rife during the pandemic, probably more so in Victoria, Sydney, Perth and Adelaide and Brisbane really didn't have the kind of lockdowns that were experienced in Victoria and New South Wales. So what that did was create an increased appetite for these forms of connection. So products like Mastermind were in hot demand. The challenge was we couldn't actually deliver it because it was a physical delivery model. Never waste a good crisis, but it's always an opportunity to then, okay, well, the customer needs are changing, so we need to map back to that. So can we do things online? Can we have some other way of delivering what it is they need and want through a period where we couldn't actually physically get together? Hosting events at clubs because they had different rules, but that would change overnight. So then we'd have to keep coming back to what do our members want? And our members didn't want more online things in COVID. So it was very difficult. It would have been illegal to deliver what they wanted. But post-COVID, one of our members has a national footprint of staff. So has visibility through an engagement survey around where sentiment is at from generally a wellbeing perspective. Across the board, Australia, if you look at the average, it was down from where it was maybe 1 or 2 years ago, which would have been pre-COVID. And so they started looking into that and they started segmenting it by geography. And then it wasn't that it was down, it was actually Victoria as a state that was bringing down the national average of these questions, which were targeted around getting a pulse on someone's mental wellness or welfare. And it sort of talks about there's a bit of a post-traumatic process that we've been through this traumatic process, and now we're sort of looking to process that. Road rage is up, things that are little telltale signs. So there's a lot of, and that's speaking very generally, and everyone has a different unique circumstance. But that's sort of something that we've seen in the data at a national level. So that's something post-COVID that we've seen. And so there's something there that a customer or a member or a human being needs. And so I'd be getting interested in that and looking at, okay, well, how can we help in that? And that would have an impact. So there are a lot of business clubs. Some have got national presence. I think there's two things happening. One is businesses are looking to move to a more flexible footprint. They don't want to have the direct engagements with rent, photocopy, the whole work. They just, I can see the value in a work club model, for example, where I can take a team of 10 and pick up a bit of footprint, and then I get access to a broader physical structure. And if I'm in another city, I can, there's benefit with that. Cub's another model as well. They've had some great growth. Appeals to a different market and membership, maybe business size. I think they may run the risk, and they're trying to wrap community around it, because I can see that wrapping community around it brings a cultural element. Culture within business or clubs you can't replicate, because you can replicate a club model. It's a real estate play, really. And I don't think they own the real estate. So the real winners are the real estate businesses or the commercial real estate businesses. But if they can wrap that community around it, there's value in that model. And I know a lot of, if I think about the target market and the stage of business they're typically in, to stereotype, it's early stage. So it's all about cash flow. It's all about growth, because that's what keeps you in business. So if I'm going to join one of these clubs, it has to align to my highest needs, which are cash flow. So I'm going to be price sensitive coming in. So don't charge me too much to have a lovely office. Although it might help me having a nice boardroom if I've got to bring a client in. So therefore, maybe I can connect it to top line growth, or I can justify whatever it is, 10 grand or whatever the annual fee is, and maybe put some payment terms around it if I'm small business. And then, okay, who's in that cohort? And then therefore, how can that come back to my highest need of cash flow or growing a business and staying in business? So I need to have deal flow. So then I'm in a situation where I'm coming to a club, but I need to transact. So that's something to manage. And then having a nice culture. And I can see how that could work, because there'll be common challenges, issues. So I'd be getting in, Leandro or someone from Salesforce to come and talk, or maybe not that, maybe it's Zero, thinking about some of the things that they could need and have value in. Wouldn't be a drive day with Range Rover or something like that, because they're probably not there on their highest need of things that they need that day, that moment. So, networking in business or in life, if you think about your success, if you think about this on any metric, you could do this exercise. Think about, what is my net wealth? And think about the 5 people that you hang around with the most. And you may or may not know how much they're worth, but you take whatever that is divided by 5, and that is your net worth. You can do that in health. So who are the 5 people that you hang around the most? What is their current health? I'm not sure what the metric is there, whether it's, weight, body mass index, whatever it is, but you can be sure that those 5, you're the average of those 5. So if you want to be more healthy, bring in a healthy person to your top 5. If you want to be more wealthy, bring in a more wealthy individual. And I think what happens is there's an obligation or something to not cull or look at who you spend time with, because who you spend time with is who you become. And so looking at that from a very structured, methodical process will therefore help you with whatever average metric you're looking to improve. It has an advantage in the next few years. And I think it's become a bit more competitive now. I think complacency is not something we can afford, because with tools like AI, they're low cost, they're high impact, you can move very quickly. So you can have a competitor popping up a lot quicker than what you might thought. So I think there'll be a lot of, because large corporations don't usually behave that way, you're going to see a lot of M&A activity in these types of businesses. So sometimes it's easier to buy than build whatever that capability is. And that's been going on already. I think if you look at maybe some of the businesses that have done extremely well in the last couple of years, AWS, Microsoft, these businesses that's focused on corporates, bringing your data into a central, we talk about it being in the cloud, but effectively what's happened is we've taken the data center or disk drive or whatever it is out of the back room, and now we've put it onto what we call the cloud, which is a more expensive operating system. It might bring in some exposure to where that data is, and we see examples all the time and sensitivities around data breaches. So they will continue. They'll continue to make boards very uncomfortable because there's an increasing regulation that the board is responsible for things like culture and things like that, which they have no ability to control. So I guess industries or businesses that have a natural advantage over the next few years are ones that can be agile, that can respond to not holding on to the old view. We talked about sort of falling in love with the customer before. I don't think that will change. There's a lot of hype at the moment around AI. It's in ultra hype phase. So AI this, AI that. Some of it's just simple prompt engineering or digital transformation. So I think businesses that are able to not lose sight with what a customer wants and what they're willing to pay for and where they see value, and then how do things like AI enhance that sort of experience. So that will mean, if you've got capability in small businesses that are building capability there, you may be an M&A target. So I think M&A activity will continue to be fairly active. And you've got trends now of companies that are delisting so they can go into a private market. So the appeal of building a business to eventually list on the ASX is maybe not where it was 5-10 years ago. Building to sell into PE or other forms of capital are probably more appealing now for founders that are on some sort of trajectory. So good luck to you all. In terms of investing, so we could look at this from a growth perspective. I think what we're seeing is the idea of finishing school, if you're pursuing a white collar type future, the idea of finishing school and then doing 4+ years as a degree and then having that degree and then putting it on the wall is, I'm not sure if that's the model going forward. It still exists today and I can see it happening, but the immediacy of ROI on learning is becoming a lot more, I want to do a course this morning, implement that this afternoon and see the benefits at night, and then tomorrow do the same thing. I don't want to spend 4 years waiting for a degree which will give me a higher market value over my competition. And if you look at new entrants to the workforce, the idea of job for life, that was probably already dead 5-10 years ago. It's still big in Japan and other countries. Our CEOs have the shortest life expectancy, not life expectancy, but our CEOs in Australia have the shortest duration in the world. So there's a tall poppy syndrome thing playing out there. So the aspiration to join a big business, work hard, advance to one day maybe become the CEO, where you on average would have 3.5 years in that role in the listed space, is not as appealing as, okay, well, I want to have a side hustle, I want to have my own business, I want to create my own skills. But when you're a founder or you're an owner or you've got a passion project or whatever, that immediacy for ROI on learning becomes a lot more sensitive. I can be in a big corporate role and I could take a couple of years to get my learning and training done, and then I'll have an incremental increase in my salary. But yeah, I think what we're seeing is just how do you tie whatever the learning product or course is to how am I going to use this and get immediate benefit and return. Top 3 learnings, I think there are always going to be relationship skills, human skills. In corporate Australia, we talk about the soft skills, when in fact the soft skills and when labelled like that, are the hardest skills to learn. I think technical skills can be, you can pick them up, but these soft, more human skills are where I'd be focusing my time. And I'm not sure what the answer is. Maybe you can join MentorList. We can work it out together. So knowing the audience, it has a founder flavour at different stages. I think, I've sort of talked today about where the business was doing well, where the business was not doing well, but maybe the difference in activity is not different. So if I'm having a great day today in the business or a great month, sales are up, the activity I'm doing is not actually that different to when shit hits the fan or that everything's going really bad. So being able to enjoy the work and the process, I think, is kind of a big part of being a founder. And if you're coming into this space with the grandeur of making a lot of money, or it's going to be a profitable venture, it certainly wasn't my experience, and it certainly wasn't the experience of many founders that I've spoken to. It's hard. Being a founder and then having a small business is difficult because you're a small business. It's, I think it's 80% of businesses fail in the first 5 years. And it doesn't discriminate around, gender or anything like that. It's just actually quite statistically difficult. So you need to be in that top 10%. So what's going to get you into that? And if it's the money, a founder's probably, if you break it down per hour, what you get paid, it's definitely not a good salary. Maybe later on, but not in those early stages. So I think that's people say find something you're passionate about. And I think the reason why they say that is because if you're not passionate about it, you're not going to put in the discretionary effort, because without discretionary effort on top of what, 9 to 5 or whatever it is, you're not going to get these results. How we can do things different. And I was talking before about reinventing or innovating and marketing on that product. So you're not getting old in your company life cycle. And that's something we always do. We always try new things, and if it works, fantastic, we double down on it. If it doesn't work, we just kind of crush it, bury it, and try something different again. So not being afraid to fail, I think, is something that we'll continue to do. But from a business perspective, we're now in Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, Adelaide, and Perth, and we're looking at Auckland and Singapore. So we'll become an international network very soon. So looking forward to that. Well, as a founder, the challenge with a founder is you end up with a disproportionate share of your wealth invested in your own business. And if you go to any investing conference, they'll tell you about diversification. So you break every rule of diversification. I think it's 11. If you can get into 11 different shares, for example, your diversification levels are, if one goes down, it's kind of like the rule of diversification. But being a founder, you kind of go against that. Maybe later in life, when you've made a bit more money and taken things off the table, then you can get that more diversified portfolio. But it is high risk having everything in, all eggs in one basket. So you find that there's not much left for investing, which is probably more for someone that's in a more stable situation where they can then go about bringing risks through investment. So in terms of my investment advice, I think if you want to have impact and create true, transgenerational wealth, transgenerational wealth, I think you need to start a business because you're not capped. I actually got this advice from a lecturer at Melbourne Uni. He said, look, Dave, if you really want to go big, then you got to start a business. You got to you can't work 9 to 5 in a job because you're by the hour. Sure, you can do the MBA with us at the university and your hourly rate will go up, but you're still capped. And so if you want to release that cap, you have to start a business and get yourself into a structure where you're not capped. So I'm always excited about potential upside.